Before we go any further, let me ask you something uncomfortable. Have you ever lowered your standards, explained your needs again and again, told yourself maybe I'm just too much, only to still feel unseen? Because here's the curiosity gap most people never confront. What if you were never asking for too much at all? What if you were just asking the wrong person in the wrong language at the wrong moment? That single realization changes everything, and by the end of this video, you'll see your past relationships in a way that might sting at first, but ultimately sets you free. Imagine this. You ask for consistency, not fireworks, not a rom-com montage, just consistency, a text back, a plan that doesn't vanish, emotional presence that doesn't come with an expiration date, and suddenly the atmosphere shifts. They sigh, they pull away, they tell you you're intense, too needy, too emotional, and that's when fear creeps in. The fear that if you ask for what you need, you'll lose them. So you do what so many smart, loving people do, you negotiate against yourself. You soften the ask, you apologize for having needs, you shrink. Here's the quiet tragedy. The moment you start believing you're too much is the moment you stop evaluating whether they're actually enough. And that's not a coincidence. It's a pattern, one that often starts beautifully. Act 1 always does. In the beginning, they show up just enough to hook you, enough charm, enough attention, enough potential, and your excitement fills in the gaps. You think, if I just explain myself better, if I'm more patient, if I don't push, funny how we'll bend ourselves into emotional origami for someone who won't even bend their schedule. And let's interrupt this spiral for a second with a question that might make you laugh nervously. If your best friend described this relationship to you word for word, would you say, yes, keep going, this feels secure? Or would you say, why are you working so hard to convince someone to treat you decently? Exactly. Here's where urgency matters. Because every time you stay stuck in this dynamic, you're training yourself to associate love with effort, anxiety, and waiting. Waiting for replies, waiting for clarity, waiting for someone to finally realize your value. But attraction doesn't grow in environments where you have to plead for basic emotional access. Desire thrives on willingness, not persuasion. And this is the pivot point, the end of Act 1, where most people miss the truth. When someone tells you you're asking for too much, they're rarely saying your needs are unreasonable. They're saying they don't want the responsibility of meeting them. That doesn't make you demanding. It makes you mismatched. But stay with me, because the next realization is the one that changes how you choose people forever. There's a moment, quiet, almost invisible, where Act 2 begins. It's the moment you start doubting your own emotional instincts. You replay conversations in your head. You ask yourself, did I say it wrong? Was my timing off? Should I have waited longer? And slowly, without realizing it, the focus shifts away from their behavior and onto your worth. This is where confusion replaces excitement. And confusion in dating is not a mystery to be solved, it's a message. Because here's the uncomfortable truth most people don't want to face. When someone is right for you, clarity feels boringly consistent. No mental gymnastics required. No decoding emojis like they're ancient hieroglyphics. When someone genuinely wants to show up, they don't experience your needs as pressure. They experience them as information, useful information, the kind that helps them love you better. So if every honest expression of your feelings is met with defensiveness, distance, or dismissal, that's not communication trouble. That's incompatibility wearing a disguise. And let's pause here, because this is where fear often spikes. The fear of loss, the fear that if you walk away, you'll confirm your worst suspicion, that maybe this is as good as it gets, that maybe everyone else will see you the same way. But notice something powerful. The people who are too much for the wrong person are often exactly right for the right one. The same qualities, depth, sensitivity, desire for connection, that were treated like burdens suddenly become assets. Think about it. You weren't asking for daily reassurance from a place of insecurity. You were asking for emotional safety. You weren't asking for commitment because you're clingy. You were asking because you're intentional. And intentional people feel threatening to those who benefit from ambiguity. That's why they stall. That's why they minimize. That's why they label your needs instead of examining their capacity. Here's a small but crucial interruption. If someone can't meet you where you are, they will always try to convince you to move where they're comfortable. And they'll frame it as growth, as patience, as being chill. Funny how being chill usually means accepting less than you deserve. Now, this is where excitement quietly re-enters the story. Because the moment you stop trying to be easier to love, something shifts. You stop performing. You stop explaining yourself into exhaustion. You start observing. You notice who leans in when you're honest and who disappears. And that data is priceless. It saves you years. But here's the twist most people don't see coming. When you finally meet someone capable of meeting your needs, it can feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. There's no chase, no anxiety spike, no wondering where you stand. And part of you might think, why doesn't this feel as intense? That question, right there, is the doorway into the final act, because what you've been calling chemistry may have actually been uncertainty. And what you're about to discover next will completely reframe how you define attraction from this point forward. This is where Act 3 quietly starts, and it doesn't explode, it settles. And that's why so many people miss it. Because when you've been conditioned to equate love with adrenaline, peace can feel suspicious. You're so used to emotional highs and lows that stability feels flat. No knots in your stomach, no rehearsed texts, no late night overthinking sessions where you analyze tone like it's a criminal investigation. And instead of relief, your nervous system asks, wait, am I bored? That question has ended more healthy connections than lack of attraction ever has. But here's the reframe that changes everything. Calm is not the absence of desire. It's the absence of fear. And fear has a way of disguising itself as passion. When someone was inconsistent, unavailable, or hot and cold, your brain stayed alert. Alert feels alive. Alive feels exciting. But excitement born from uncertainty is not intimacy. It's survival mode with. Good lighting. Let's interrupt the romance myth for a moment. If love were meant to feel like constant anxiety, therapists would be out of business and dating coaches would be prescribing stress. Yet somehow we've learned to mistrust the people who make us feel secure and chase the ones who keep us guessing. Why? Because with the wrong person, you were always trying to earn something. And earning creates attachment faster than receiving ever could. Now here's the part that might sting, but it's also the part that frees you. When you were asking for more, you weren't trying to be difficult. You were trying to return to yourself. You were trying to restore balance in a dynamic that only worked when you were smaller, quieter, more patient than you actually are. And the moment you stopped shrinking, the dynamic cracked. Not because you broke it, but because it was never built to hold the real you. There's something deeply empowering about realizing this. It means you don't need to become less. You don't need to rehearse your needs more gently. You don't need to wait longer, explain better, or love harder. You need to choose differently. Because the right person doesn't see your needs as demands. They see them as directions. They don't ask you to prove your worth. They assume it. They don't panic when you ask for clarity. They offer it willingly. And here's where urgency comes in. Every day you stay attached to someone who treats your needs like a burden. You delay meeting someone who would meet them with ease, not effort. Ease, the kind of ease that doesn't make you question yourself, the kind that doesn't require strategy, the kind that feels simple in a way that feels almost too good to trust. So the real question isn't, was I asking for too much? The real question is, why did I stay so long with someone who couldn't give what I needed? And when you answer that honorable, honestly, not with self-blame, but with awareness, you unlock a new standard, one where love doesn't require you to disappear. Stay with that thought, because once you internalize it, you'll never negotiate your needs the same way again. And what that changes in how you date next is more powerful than you think. By now, you've seen the full picture, the fear, the frustration, the endless over-explaining. But here's the final piece that completes the story, the part that turns hindsight into strategy. The moment you realize you were never asking for too much, something subtle yet profound shifts inside you. You start to notice patterns before you get entangled. You start to sense when someone is capable of meeting you halfway and when they're not. You don't need to force them to show up. You watch who already does. And here's the twist that most people completely overlook, recognizing the difference between too much for the wrong person and just right for the right person ISN. Isn't just a dating lesson, it's a life lesson. Every relationship where you compromised, explained too much, or softened your truth was actually training you for what's real. All that emotional labor wasn't wasted. It was preparation. A kind of emotional boot camp that teaches you exactly what you won't settle for again. let's pause for a reality check. This doesn't mean the next person you meet will be perfect, but it does mean you'll enter relationships from a place of clarity, not desperation. You'll know your boundaries and you'll recognize when someone respects them without effort. And when that happens, everything changes. Excitement returns, but it's no longer tangled with anxiety. Desire blooms naturally because there's no fight, no performance, no hidden agenda, just connection. Here's a humorous but painful truth. Some of us spend years trying to convince people to love us like a discount version of ourselves. You've seen it happen. You lower your voice, your expectations, your laughter, even your dreams to fit someone else's comfort zone. And when they finally leave anyway, you're left wondering why your effort didn't pay off. Spoiler alert, it wasn't about effort. It was about alignment. Compatibility isn't negotiable. Your energy is precious and it deserves someone capable of matching it. Finally, let's land this where it matters most. You were never asking for too much. Your needs, your desires, your expectations, they're not excessive, unreasonable, or flawed. They're signals pointing you toward people who are capable of showing up fully. And when you start to operate from that perspective, the dating world doesn't feel like a minefield anymore. It becomes a map, guiding you toward relationships that actually nurture you rather than drain you. So the question you leave with today is simple but powerful. Who are you willing to be seen by? And more importantly, who is willing to meet the real you, not the edited, compromised, apologetic version you've been offering? When you answer that honestly, you'll stop wasting time on those who can't and start opening doors to the ones who can. And that, more than anything, is how you reclaim not just love, but your own self-respect. You were never too much. You were just never with the right person. And now you finally know the difference. Everything finally clicks when you see the truth clearly. The heartbreak, the frustration, the nights spent wondering if you were too much. It all makes sense now. You were never asking for too much. Your emotional needs, your desire for consistency, your need to feel seen and valued, they were all reasonable. The problem was never you, it was the person you gave them to. They simply weren't capable of showing up in the way you needed, and that's why it always felt lie. Something was missing, even when you were giving your all. Think about all those times you apologized for being human, made excuses for someone else's inability to meet you halfway, or convinced yourself that love required negotiation instead of natural alignment. Every time you did, you chipped away at your self-respect. What you thought was patience was actually compromise that drained your energy and dulled your spark. Feeling exhausted, unseen, or invisible wasn't your fault. It was a signal that the dynamic itself was flawed. But here's the empowering part. Every tear, every overexplained conversation, every night spent overthinking was teaching you something crucial. You were learning to spot patterns, to distinguish between effort and struggle, between someone who is willing and someone who is incapable. You were learning, sometimes painfully, what love actually feels like when it's reciprocal, effortless, and honoring. Once that truth settles in, everything shifts. You stop shrinking yourself to fit someone else's limitations. You stop apologizing for having needs. You start observing who leans in when you're authentic, who listens without judgment, who prioritizes connection without hesitation. Suddenly, what once felt unattainable, being loved fully for exactly who you are, starts to feel real, possible, and within reach. Every day spent with someone who can't meet your needs is a day delayed in finding someone who can and will. The right person doesn't make you feel like asking for love is a burden. They don't label your needs as too much. They meet you where you are fully with respect, attentiveness, and genuine desire. That clarity changes everything. Your needs are valid. Your heart is worthy. The love you've been searching for is out there. You weren't asking for too much. You were just asking in the wrong place. When you stop chasing validation from those who cannot give it, you start attracting the people who naturally honor your value. That's how you reclaim your power, your self-respect, and the kind of love that feels effortless, real, and lasting. It's never about being too much. It's about being exactly who you are for someone who is exactly right for you.